everyone, Mark here. Welcome back to Cali Plans. So for today, since we're still in quarantine, I decided to make another interview. This time with Sir Chuck Cerrillo of Cerriscapades. So you probably know him from his YouTube channel and his website. So now we'll have a few questions for him. We'll be featuring his video now. There. How would you like me to call you, Mr. Chuck? Kuya Chuck?
Just just call me Chuck. I'm fine with Chuck.
I know. Okay, Sir Chuck. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Well, let's go to the first question. Sir Chuck,
Mhm.
when did you start growing succulents?
All right. I am not exactly sure about the exact date now, but I'm pretty sure it was in the October of the 2016. So I started out um, with just 4 pieces of Echeveria elegans. The inspiration for that came from when I was strolling around the neighborhood before. I saw one of the properties with a huge carpet of Echeveria elegans on their front yard. I don't have a photo of that, but I have a photo of something else. Yeah. So this is a huge bowl with lots of Echeveria elegans. So if you imagine an entire yard filled with that, that's basically what I saw. And at that time, I had no idea. I had zero idea on how to grow succulents. So I thought my only impression of them is that everybody says that they're low maintenance, easier than regular plants because you could just leave them alone. You don't have to worry about watering them too much.
Yes.
But if only I knew then what I know now, I could say that they're very, very wrong in that regard.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it started out just with this photo that you see here. So I was when I went around looking at different nurseries, and I was thinking of what sort of plants to start with. I saw this one, and I said to myself that yeah, I'm going for this look. So I bought my first set. It's four four tiny specimens of Echeveria elegans, and I bought them for all four of them for $10. That's uh, about 300 pesos, I guess. I didn't know what the correct pricings were, so I later found out that that nursery wasn't exactly cheap. But as a beginner, it doesn't really matter as long as you have the plans. And yeah, moving on. I later
Wow.
found out that I really loved Echeveria because as a beginner you tend to just collect across the board. So whatever plant that you see, you feel that you might just have to have it. But the more that I got exposed to succulents, I eventually uh, the way I was collecting them before, I was purchasing cuttings from friends and some other collectors, and eventually I found an Echeveria collector. He was an rather elderly gentleman in his maybe 60s or 70s. And as you could imagine, as you could see, he has a very huge collection, and majority of these are Echeverias. So this was my first time seeing various types of Echeveria, and I was it was love at first sight, I guess, because if you look at this collection,
Wow.
everything looks the same. They are all rosette forming plants, and yeah, they were quite impressive. So I had a look around, purchased about, I don't know, I think I went home with about 20 to 30 different types of plants, all of them Echeveria. And he was only selling tiny pops. So yeah, at least from looking at his collection, I know what they would end up looking like when they grow up. But I kind of had a long-term plan in mind. I wanted to have something like this, and I'm only starting with this. So yeah, it's a long haul plan. It's not something that you could just do immediately. So yeah, looking at his collection, I fell in love with the freely and the warty type of Echeveria, which I
The
don't think
Gibiflora.
yeah, mainly Gibiflora hybrids. So I knew then that these are the type of plants that I wanted to focus on, and that's the rest is history, as they say. So yeah, that's how I got into growing succulents. At the time, I think there wasn't that much resources online about it, and you could say that I grew up watching Laura Eubanks, like most of us do.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the second question. Have you
Mhm.
had a stressful moment in your garden? Tell us about a stressful moment that you have had.
Uh, yes, several times throughout the years. As one would expect, it is mostly whenever you deal with dying plants or whenever you deal with outbreaks. So I can't remember when the first scare was, but to put simply, um, every time a plant dies or is dying, it is really stressful. And for instance, if I could name those times, it would be the first time that I experienced a snails outbreak, the first time I experienced a vine weevils outbreak, the first time I experienced a mealybugs outbreak, and the first fungus outbreak. You get the idea. But memorable for me would be the vine weevils because I had to wage war with them. I'm not sure if you get vine weevils in the Philippines, but let me show you what they look like. This is what they would look like. They are tiny and
Yes.
brown, and they tend to munch on leaves and stems. They leave this little circular holes. I'm not sure if there's a sample of the vine weevil damage here.
But
But
they
anyway,
also attack succulents.
yes, as long as it's leafy, yeah, they attack. Um, they are memorable for me because I had to. The thing with vine weevils is that they only come out in dark, and they are very sensitive to vibrations. So if they sense any movement, any loud sound, because as you know, sound creates vibrations, they would drop off from wherever they are. So if they are holding onto a stem, they would just drop off into the ground. So it would be very hard to detect them. You would have to be very careful, um, you have to move slowly. You have to be very silent. That way, they would not have a chance to escape. So yeah, um, they blend so well with the soil, as you can see from the photos here.
Yes.
And the only way that you would know that there's an outbreak of vine weevils is by looking at damage. So it's not like it's not easy to prevent them. You would have to know where they are first, and your only indicator for those is to look for existing damage. So what I had to do, I had to first off, I had to identify what sort of pest they are, and after a while I found out that they are called vine beetles. So I looked them up online. That's how I found out that they only come out at night because I never see them during the day. And what I've been doing is that every night at dusk I would come out with just a flashlight or my phone, and I would just pick them out from the stems, and I would keep doing this over the next several days until eventually uh, I would their numbers would be low enough that I do not see them every night. And yeah, imagine having to do that every single night. It's so annoying.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, so that so that's the main reason why it's memorable for me because I had to really devote a lot of time just to eradicating them. But in subsequent years, I no longer mind them as much because they are only active. As most pests, they are only active during the warmer months, and as you know, here in Australia, we have 4 seasons, so they are only really a problem during summer. And uh, I don't really. I allow them to have a few plants as long as the damage does not spread through the rest of the garden. Then I don't really mind. But you know, having a few plants eaten is not really a problem for me anymore. And I have the same standpoint for other pests such as snails, caterpillars, and whatnot. As long as they do not move on to the rest of the garden, then I'm fine because the infestation in my garden usually start at some corner or just one place, and I try to keep the infestation just centered in that place. So yeah, I'm happy as long as it does not spread around. Quarantine, basically.
Yes.
Insecticides are not usually effective on them because they do not target the sap. They do not. They just eat the leaves. The damage they do is superficial. So uh, systemic pesticides might work, but that means that I would also have to be careful of have the flowers, prevent them from being used by the bees. And the other, I think, a more effective deterrent, or at least a more effective solution for them would be to use diatomaceous earth, because these things are mechanical in nature, and they would get between the shells, the carapace of the vine beetles. So anything that has segments, and most insects have segments, diatomaceous earth would work best. But I have a huge garden. It's not practical for me to sprinkle everywhere.
Yes.
So yeah.
So let's move on to the next question. What, for your through your experience, what are the benefits of planting succulents on the ground compared to on in pots?
Okay. The appeal of in-ground planting is mainly to do with um, assuming you do your soil properly, your plants would require less maintenance, because when I say doing your soil properly, it means that you have to take care that they have proper drainage. There is no flooding that happens. So even so, despite the, as you know, it has been raining a lot here recently. So even if it rains every day, as long as the whole plot drains properly, and there's no water logging that's happening, then they are actually less maintenance than having plants in pots. Because with pots, you would have to be, well, it depends on the type of pot that you have, but most people use sealed pots or plastic pots, and those are poor in terms of drainage because they only can drain from the bottom. Plastic pots is good if the plant loves water, but for most succulents, especially if you live in a place that's so humid, then you would not want the plant to stay wet for too long, which, this is something that everybody says when handling succulents. You do not want them to stay wet for too long. Apart from that, well, the difference between pots and in the ground is that in pots, if they are sealed, water just drains from the bottom. If the pot is porous, then water can dissipate through the walls laterally. In ground, the rate of dissipation is much faster because if you flood an area, the water just flows away, so it doesn't stay as wet or flooded as long as your soil mix is well draining. That's a big caveat there. And apart from that, not a lot of people realize this, but having your plants in pots, especially if the pots are tiny, it would stunt the growth or prevent the succulent from reaching their maximum size. And I personally like having very large plants, so having them in the ground means that they would be reaching their maximum size sooner, as opposed to having them in tiny pots. Their growth rate would be slower, especially when uh, the roots start to coil around and they have nowhere else to go. So if your plants are pot bound or root bound, then they would be growing a lot slower than normal, and and in very extreme cases, they would have health issues. They would just die. So, yeah, that's I think the main appeal for me for having my plants in the ground.
Yes,
Of
yes,
course, also landscaping. That's the second one, but yeah,
yes. For the beauty of it, for the garden, yes, the
yeah, yeah.
landscaping. And do you find that this is a bonus question? Do you find that plants planted on the ground are, you know, have to be watered less frequently than in pots?
Um, yes and no. It depends a lot on your climate. In my case, well, it depends on your climate and how you address your how you create your soil mix appropriate for your climate. Because in ground, um, just to give you a perspective of how it works in my area. I only water my plants outside of during the warmer months. So during autumn and winter, I do not water them anymore. I just leave them alone. The main reason is that most of my plants are echeveria, and they tend to be active during the warmer months. During the colder months, they start slowing down, so they do not use all of the water anyway. And apart from that, during the warmer months, the soil dries more quickly than if it was cold. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So I guess it has to do with you. You just pretty much have to monitor the rate at which your soil is drying out, and just make sure that once it's completely dry, you just have to water again. So the yes part here is if your soil is too loose, too well draining that it dries up too quickly, then you might have to water more. But if it in your climate it rains a lot, then it cancels out, so you do not have to water anymore. So I guess it's really depending on the circumstances that you're in, and I could not give a simple yes no answer.
Oh, yes, of course. So it still depends on a lot of factors,
Yeah.
not just the planting area, no. Okay,
Hmm.
so let's move on to the next question. Why is it
Yeah.
important? I've seen your Instagram. Let me just say this now. I've seen your Instagram, your daily Echeverria posts, and
Hmm.
I really find it very impressive that you have a large collection. And sometimes when there's people asking at Facebook groups what's the idea of their plants, I usually look at your Instagram for reference. Yeah, so I use them for
Okay.
reference. So
Hmm.
for the next question, why do you think that it is important for growers to identify their plants?
All right. Um, my main answer for this, and to paraphrase Sun Tzu, knowing your enemy is half the battle. That's pretty much it. But yeah, I say that because I think it is important. It is important at least knowing the genus, or if you can, the species of the plant that you have, because there's no real need to go down to cultivar or hybrid name level, because most of the time the names that you see are just common names or names provided by marketing names, basically. So I do not like to dwell too much on that level, but I need to know at the very least the genus, and if I can, the species that was involved in this cultivar, because that would give me a very good idea of how to care for these types of plants. Let's say, as I mentioned earlier, I live in a climate with distinct four seasons, so knowing that a specific plant that I have is dormant during winter would help me figure out whether or not I should water it today, or just leave it alone, because uh, I've done this many times, and I've seen this so many times that people have killed their aeonium plants because they have been watering it a lot during summer. Because in summer, aeoniums are dormant; they just close up and they look very dry, and people thought that those plants were dying, when in fact they are just resting, hibernating, or being dormant. And as a result, they would try watering the plant almost every day, because it seems like it is staying dry and it is not improving, and the result is that they're killing it faster than they would have if they just left it alone. So yeah, knowing how to properly care for a plant, at least on a genus and species level, would would arm you with the knowledge to deal with similar types of plants. So oftentimes in groups you would see people asking specific care tips for a specific plant, and thinking that if they have another plant, they would need to ask for care tips for that plant as well. I think that's a very wasteful way to go about it. All you need to know is know what type of genus and species that plant is, and just look up similar types of plants and see how they recommend growing or caring for those types of plants, and trying to adapt, trying to apply the similar growing conditions for those plants. So yeah, let's say you have a, if you have an echeveria and someone shows you another echeveria, at least you know that's an echeveria. So whatever you're doing for this plant, you could try doing on the other plant and see if it works. Otherwise, you could just adjust. But at least there's a baseline that you have to follow, or a baseline that you're doing, rather than just guessing what to do with this other plant. So basically, that's where I am coming from. I do not need to know the exact hybrid name or cultivar name. I just need to know that it is an echeveria. And another thing, one of my gripes with some sellers is that they are using the wrong names. Not in terms of the common name, specific name. I don't really care about that, as I mentioned earlier. But some sellers list the plant as completely wrong genus. For example, if it is an echeveria, uh, something. I've seen someone sell an aeonium under the name echeveria, which, as far as I'm concerned, is really reckless, because if you try to treat that plant as an echeveria, the aeonium as an echeveria, then you would be killing it softly. Yeah, that's pretty
Yes.
much that's pretty much my complaint with some sellers. I would be all right if they just use the common names, but if they try to place the botanical name, and the wrong botanical name at that, I think they're doing more harm than good. Yeah.
Yes, yes, of course. That's also a problem with a lot of sellers here. Sometimes the hybrids, Graptopetalum, they name it also as Echeveria.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, I see that a lot. Yeah.
yeah, but they're actually they're very different, and I believe that Graptos are winter growers. Is that right?
Um, yeah, that's the thing. When people say winter and summer growers, they assume that in winter these things just grow, and in summer these things just grow. It's more of a temperature range. It's not a hard line between winter and summer, because the definition of winter varies from area to area. For instance, here in Australia, when we say winter, here in Melbourne, when we say winter, it usually just goes down to 0 degrees Celsius. But if you ask someone from, let's say, the northern hemisphere, from Canada or something, their winter goes down to the negative degrees. So our winters are not the same. And in the Philippines, if you ask about winter, then
Oh,
you're going to expect just
gray.
28 degrees, 30 degrees. That's our winter.
Yes.
Yeah. So I am not really fond of the term winter growers, a winter dormant, summer dormant. It's more of, I just want to know what temperature range the plants are active in. So Graptopetalums, well, echeverias, they tend to be active between, this is just a guess, maybe around 15 to 30 degrees Celsius. And if you go beyond that, if you go above 30 or below 15, then they start to slow down with their growth. So it's fair to say that they are not necessarily summer growers, because in some places, summer, it can be really hot. It can go beyond 30 degrees, 35. In our area, it can even go up to 50 degrees. So during those temperatures, you're not going to expect your echeveria to do really well. They would stay dormant, they will close up. And if you give them lots of water during that time, they will just end up rotting, because they are not using that water, and it's just attracting some fungus and other microbes. So yeah, it's not fair to call them summer growers, because they have a specific growing range, and outside of that growing range, they are no longer comfortable, and they just go dormant. With Graptos, the growing range is slightly more on the colder side, maybe a few degrees lower. So if 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 we specify that echeverias are 15 to 30, then maybe Graptos are 10 to 25. I'm not really sure, but you get the idea. They are more comfortable in slightly colder conditions than echeveria. Unfortunately, they get the label of winter growers, which it's not really accurate. So, but it's harder to. I guess it just makes it easier to for some people to explain that these things they like cold more than echeveria. Yeah, labels ambiguous.
do you
Yeah.
find that dormant plants grow? I mean, dormant plants become smaller. They lose leaf count when they are dormant.
Um, yes. It's not that they are losing leaves. It's more of that they are not growing enough leaves to replace the the rate that they are losing leaves. So during growing season, they grow more leaves than they lose. But during during their dormancy, the rate that they're putting out new leaves is slower than the amount of leaves that they lose naturally. So yeah, it's an illusion, I guess. But
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. So it's okay. Maybe sometimes that plants lose leaves. No.
yeah, it's perfectly normal. It's it's like I'm pretty sure you're familiar with deciduous trees. Those trees in abroad where in autumn they lose leaves and they grow them back in spring. So it's the same thing. Only with supplements they do not lose all of their leaves. They just slow down with their production.
Let's move on to the next question. What tips do you have for beginners?
Something that I like to preach is just collecting across the board. Just try everything at least once and keep experimenting because there's no better teacher than experience. Everything that I know now is a combination of things that I've read online, and a majority a majority of these is stuff that I have learned by myself, by experimenting through the years. So really, being able to being able to do your own experiments and learning from them, learning from your mistakes, not being afraid to make mistakes. That's the main thing that you have to. That's the main takeaway from here, because a lot of people are so scared to make mistakes, so scared to have their plants die on them. You know, you would not improve if you do not make any mistakes. So don't feel bad if you kill a lot of plants, because I've done the same in the past. Uh, just be smart about it. A lot of people have already done their research ahead of you. So make sure to take their input into consideration, but at the same time, you know, uh, feel free to do some experiments. Just don't do any, I would say, stupid, redundant experiments. Basically, people have already proved that this works. So you could try to expand on that, but there's no need to reinvent the wheel. But at the same time, you know, if it helps you with your peace of mind, by all means, do the experiments yourself. But yeah, just make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. You might lose some plants along the way. And for that, experiment with easier or more common plants. Don't do this on expensive plants right away. Yeah.
Let's go on to the last topic in our list. Tell us more about your website and your YouTube channel.
Yes. As you have mentioned in the beginning, I run the Cerriscapades channel, and it is from the name. The name is a portmanteau or a combination of a few words, which is basically my last name and what the channel is about. So it is about my last name Cerrillo, and what I do with the garden, which is xeriscaping. Xeriscaping meaning working with drought-tolerant plants, which are mainly succulents in my case, and escapades. So Cerrillo's Xeriscaping Escapades. My channel is mainly about my adventures in my backyard and showing you what I do and what I've learned. And that's pretty much it. It's like a let's play if you are familiar with the gaming world, only this is in the gardening context. So let's plant.
Yes. Okay. And do you have bigger plans for your website and for your channel someday, maybe?
Very long term, but I'm hoping that this would be big enough that I could do this full time. But right now, no way. I don't have the time for it. Yeah, it's mostly going to be from day to day. It's mostly just going to be an information channel. But in the future, I might be creating my own mini shows. Technically, I do already have one. It's the Let's Plant vlog, But I want to expand into creating more stuff, tours or plant spotlights. But right now, I have very little free time between the work and my personal life. So yeah, someday I would get there, but not right now.
Yes, okay. Because a lot of YouTubers, um, plant or gardening YouTube channels. A lot of them actually they don't have other work. They already sustain themselves through YouTube.
Yeah, yeah, that would be really fun. But yeah, I made a promise to myself that uh, I would not make gardening my main thing, because I like gardening to be my, for the lack of a better word, I think, yeah, I want gardening to be my stress relief from work. So if gardening becomes my source of stress, then it would no longer be enjoyable for me. You know what I mean.
Yes, yes,
So yeah, I want it to be stress relief. So at the very, I think the most that I would do is to reduce my working hours. Maybe just work part time. That way, I could expand the time that I give for gardening. But until then, you know, I would. I don't think I would go full time on this garden. But who knows? Who knows what will happen?
yes. Maybe someday uh you'll have enough what's the better word for it? You'll have enough so that you don't have to work anymore. And
Yeah,
yeah,
we'll
and
see.
become
if
be,
if we come to that point, I would not refuse. Because that's a privilege. But if going to I'm not going to push myself so hard just to be able to reach that sustainability level, uh, especially since I have some dependents. I have some young kids, so I would not want to be depending on just one source on just YouTube, especially since it is not under my complete control. But yeah, I have my own sets of skills. I'm a web developer by profession, so I could still use that as my main source of income, and YouTube would just be on the side. And yeah, why not both?
okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Chuck, for all your time and for
Mhm.
all your help. I hope that this video will help more beginners here in the Philippines and
Mhm.
both internationally, because
Yeah,
succulent growing is still a very young business. Yes, very
yeah,
everyone's
it's still growing. The interest is growing.
yes, it is growing.
Yeah.
Everyone's still a beginner with this. I actually started
Mhm.
last year, so I hope that this video will help everyone. And thanks again, Mr. Chuck, for your time.
My pleasure.